When I did my review of the Volkswagen Lamando SEL last year, it was a showroom review with a quick test drive that blew my socks off, especially in the performance segment. Now, we all know that a showroom review and a quick test drive is not enough to truly savor the vehicle's quirks, and so we borrowed the Volkswagen Lamando SEL for 1 week to truly test it out. Will it still be my ultimate sleeper car in the compact sedan category? Well, it's time for us to find out. Let's do this! Hello guys, I'm Reagan and welcome back to another car review. If you're new to my channel, I hope you click that subscribe button and become part of the Reagan Strides family. If you're my subscriber already, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Now I'd appreciate it if you also click that like button. Also special thanks to Volkswagen Philippines for lending us the Lamando for an entire week. The Volkswagen Lamando SEL we have here is the flagship sedan offering from VW Philippines. It's fast becoming a specialty vehicle because more and more people are opting to purchase crossovers and SUVs. Still, it's the only German executive compact sedan that you can purchase for below 2 million Philippine pesos because this top-spec VW Lamando SEL has a retail price of only 1,703,000 Philippine pesos. Now, there was no price increase from when I reviewed this Lamando last year, and that's mainly because the specs from last year's model is the same as the one that we have now. Now, I've always viewed Volkswagens as sleeper cars, but let's get this one thing out of the way right here at the start. There is nothing sleeper about this bright red paint job that this Lamando SEL comes in. Now, VW Philippines calls this Misano Red, and it definitely is a striking color, especially when you look at the more subdued styling of the VW Lamando. Now, in my opinion, guys, I am liking this bright red color because it forces you to take a second look at the Lamando, and when you do that, you'll notice the gorgeous LED DRLs that it has on its LED headlight units. Now, these LED headlights are also some of the brightest LED headlights that I've seen in any of the cars that I've reviewed, which is a good thing, because that would keep the Lamando quite safe when you're driving it at night. Now, the fog lights are halogen units though, which is, well, not really aesthetic, but at least it is functional because you really need yellow light if you try to break through the fog. Now, let me share with you one of the biggest ironies about the VW Lamando. You see, Volkswagen always styles its cars to blend into the crowd. But since more and more people are driving crossovers and SUVs, when you spot a bright red European compact executive sedan in a sea of crossovers or SUVs, or maybe even Innovas, well then, it's really gonna be quite eye-catching, especially in this bright red color. The side profile of the Lamando is sleek and looks absolutely classy. Now, it is quite large for a compact sedan, but then most compact sedans nowadays are all growing when it comes to size. Now, the Lamando also comes with power folding side mirrors here with LED turn signals, but it also has puddle lamps, which is a feature that I didn't really notice when I did my showroom review of the Lamando last year. Now, the wheels of this car could use a size up though, because we only get 17-inch wheels here rather than the usual 18s that can be found in top-spec variants. These 17-inch wheels are wrapped in 225/50 R17 tires. Now, behind those wheels, we get 4-wheel disc brakes. You've got ventilated disc up front and solid disc at the back. Now, the suspension is a MacPherson setup in the front and an independent multi-link rear suspension at the rear end. Now, the rear end of the Lamando is as Volkswagen as it can get. It has these beautifully designed LED taillights here and also a solo rear fog light right there. Now, the Volkswagen badge in the center is still as cool as it was when I first saw it in my showroom review last year. You see, this Volkswagen badge houses your trunk opener, and it also hides your reverse camera. Now, since the reverse camera is hidden here, the rear end of this Lamando is clean and sleek. And it really reminds me of the rear end of an Audi A4. Well, no surprise there really. Now, when you pop open this trunk, you'll get 480 liters of trunk capacity. And as you can see, my medium-sized luggage is already there. And it easily fits in the trunk of this Lamando. And you have space for a second medium-sized luggage right beside it. Now, you also have some more space at the sides for smaller items. So that's also a good thing. Now, since 480 liters might not be enough, you could always tumble down the seat backs of the second row, which would now grant you 1,150 liters of cargo capacity. However, the seat backs don't fold flat to the floor, which is something that you also have to take into consideration. The VW Lamando SEL that we get in the Philippines has a 1.4-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine that can push out 148 horses and 250 Newton meters of torque. Now, we don't get the more potent 2-liter engine that the other markets get, which is a shame really, because that engine can give out like 220 horses. Now, that would be really good. However, Volkswagen Philippines brought in the smaller displacement engine in the Lamando in order to avail of the tax breaks that are being given to vehicles with an engine displacement of 1.5 liters and below. Now, that's the reason why this Volkswagen Lamando is priced quite competitively at the same level as the other top-spec Japanese compact sedans out there. Now, the power is sent to the front wheels via a 7-speed dual-clutch transmission, which Volkswagen calls its 7-speed DSG. Now, the fuel economy figures of the Lamando is also quite decent for an executive compact sedan. You see, in the city, I was able to get 8 kilometers per liter. Granted, I live in traffic-ridden Makati, but when I took it out on the highway, I was able to get as much as 20 kilometers per liter, which is phenomenal, especially since it wasn't even a fuel economy run. Now, when I did my showroom review of the Volkswagen Lamando last year, I didn't really get a chance to dive deep into the cabin quirks of this vehicle. But now that it's been with me for several days, I got to discover several quirks, and I'll share all of those quirks with you in this video. Now, the first quirk that I've seen is the fog light switch. You see, typical of any German vehicle offering, the headlight switch is a rotary knob that's found here on the left side of the dashboard to the left of the steering wheel. So that's pretty normal. But to operate the fog lights, you have to pull on this knob once, which operates the front fog light, and pull on it again a second time, which operates the rear fog lights. Now, that sounds cool, especially if you've been driving like Japanese or Korean cars for your entire life. But I would admit, yes, if you've been driving these German cars, especially those that are part of the Volkswagen group, well, this switch is pretty ordinary. Now, the second quirk that I noticed are the seats. Now, the seats of this top-spec Lamando SEL are leather-wrapped, and we do get a nice perforated seat back and also some white piping here on the sides. The seats are also power adjustable, at least for the driver's side, but the passenger side will have to make do with manual adjustments. However, that's not the quirk that I noticed with these seats. You see, the headrest adjustments can be found at the side of the headrest, which is a circular button there, rather than the usual place, which is normally at the base of the headrest. I don't know, guys. Maybe it's ordinary for the Volkswagen group, but personally, I really find it quirky. Now, these seats, these front seats are also heated seats, but they're not ventilated, so I truly doubt that it will get some use here in our hot tropical country. The steering wheel of the Lamando is also quite slim and small for an executive compact sedan, but it is leather wrapped, and we also have a nice flat bottom here. Now, we also have buttons for hands-free connectivity, and we also have adaptive cruise control in this Volkswagen Lamando, which should make your long drives really quite relaxing. Now, I do wish that this thing came with paddle shifters. I do recall that I mentioned that also in my review of the Lamando last year, because this vehicle would be absolutely brilliant if it only had paddle shifters. Now, the good thing here is the steering wheel also adjusts for tilt, and it also telescopes. And the range of telescoping and tilting is also quite long, so that's also a good thing. Now, the top spec Lamando SEL comes equipped with a fully digital instrument gauge cluster here, which has a design that you can change to suit your preferences. You can have a typical normal instrument gauge layout here with like an analog dials for your tach and your speedo, or you could approach it in a minimalist approach, which just displays your chosen vehicle information, or you can go for an in-between layout which displays everything in a digital format. It's a nice and clean digital instrument gauge cluster here, and it suits the Lamando quite well. Now, this top-spec Lamando SEL comes equipped with a 9.2-inch touchscreen infotainment system that has Apple CarPlay and Apple CarPlay only. Well, I mentioned in my review of this car last year that it came with Android Auto, but apparently that's not the case. Rather, the Lamando SEL only has MirrorLink capability and Baidu CarLife. At least it has Apple CarPlay for iPhone users out there. Now, the infotainment system also houses the image for the reverse camera, and the image quality of the camera is quite decent. The thing is, there is also a party trick in this infotainment system because Volkswagen equipped this with its gesture control. You see, you could just swipe through with your hand and go through your songs or your playlist with a wave of your hand like that. I mean, it is a neat party trick, but to be perfectly honest, guys, I don't really see the practicality of that gesture control feature. Unless, well, it is VW's subtle way of showing us a bit of their muscle. You know, they're flexing their capability. Yes, we can equip our Lamando with gesture control. Yeah, I think that would be the thing. Because, well, if I'm gonna change through my songs or my playlist, I'll just use the hands-free connectivity buttons on my steering wheel. Thank you very much. Now, we do have a dual-zone automatic climate control system here, which also comes with clean air technology, which pretty simply means that it emits ions, negative ions in the vehicle, which should help purify the air inside your Lamando's cabin. Now, we also have an electronic park brake here with an auto hold feature. Pretty useful, especially for a dual clutch transmission. By the way, a pro tip, guys, when you're in a traffic intersection or when you're stopped, you don't really need to remove your dual clutch transmission from drive and put it in neutral like an automatic or a CVT. You don't have to do that. Just keep it in drive, and that's not going to hurt your transmission at all. Now, moving forward, we have a couple of cup holders here, which is large enough that it can easily pass my clean canteen test. This is my clean canteen. Boom. As you can see, it passes with flying colors. Now, if you don't need those cup holders, it goes away by closing that cubby right there. We also have a center armrest here, which rounds up the whole area, the whole center tunnel area of your Lamando. It's also wrapped in leather. Now, when you look at the cockpit area of this Volkswagen Lamando, I did mention in the past that it's a mixed bag, and I still have that same feeling even after driving this for several days now. You still get some hard plastics in the lower part of the dashboard, on the sides of the center tunnel, on some of the areas of your door cards, which kind of gives it a bit of a budget feeling. However, the top dashboard is wrapped in leather, as well as the top of the door cards and also the elbow rest on your door panel here. So yeah, it's some mixed bag. It's got some premium bits, it's got some budget bits, but overall it's still a pretty decent cabin to be in. The back seat of the Lamando is only suited for 2 people, mainly because of the way the back seats are shaped. It can only accommodate 2 people, plus the fact that we have a pretty high center tunnel right here in the middle. Now, I'm quite confused why they did this, because the VW Lamando is a front-wheel drive vehicle. Hence, we don't really need to have like a drive shaft that would connect to the rear wheels. Anyway, guys, well, I'm 5'6", and as you can see, this is my driving position right here, and I got a good 8 inches of knee room, which is quite decent for a compact sedan, but the headroom is only a paltry 3 inches. Now, that's probably because of the near sportback styling of the Lamando. So if you're taller than myself, well, this back seat might be a little bit cramped for you. Now for toys, guys, we have a couple of rear AC vents here. We also have a couple of USB charging ports, plus the Lamando is equipped with 8 speakers because we got a couple of tweeters mounted right here on the door cards of the rear doors. So that should make for a better than usual audio quality and experience. Now, enough of the back seat, guys. Let's hop back to the driver's seat and take this VW Lamando SEL out for a spin on the highway. Alright guys, so we're now driving the Volkswagen Lamando and we are headed out to the highway. And I mentioned in my first review that the visibility of this car is a bit compromised because of that steeply raked back windshield that we have up front. And driving this thing for several days now, yes, I will concur with my original assessment of the visibility of the Lamando. Yes, it is compromised visibility, especially if you are quite used to driving an SUV or a crossover. We really have that steeply raked back windshield there, so it feels like you're looking out from inside the tank. Now, it's not really as bad as, let's say, the Chevy Camaro, which that thing really has really poor forward visibility, but this one gives you a bit more of that feeling of sportiness up front. The sideways visibility is quite decent. The windows are a little bit larger, at least than the windshield. But yeah, overall, you'll have to get used to the visibility of this thing because it is nowhere near that of a crossover or an SUV. Now, the seat comfort of the Lamando is, well, it could be iffy for some people. Now, why do I say that? We've got some really aggressive side bolsters here on the sides of my body. Now, it feels like an actual racing seat, believe it or not. I mean, considering that this is just a 1.4-liter turbo petrol engine and not the fire-breathing 2-liter turbo that the other markets get. However, yeah, it's not really an issue for me because as you can see, guys, I am an average Asian build, so I fit quite well in these seats. But if you are a larger person than myself, yeah, these seats might get a bit tight, especially when it comes to the sides of your body, especially the love handles. Now, in my previous review of the Lamando, I mentioned that the steering feel was on the hefty side. And that was just a quick test drive anyway. But now that I've driven this for several days, I could say that at parking lot speeds, the steering feel is quite light. It is an electric power assist system, so that's why it has that light steering feel. In fact, it's a little bit on the artificial side. However, Volkswagen calls this an adjustable motorized power steering system, which means that at highway speeds like what we're in now, we're at 80 kilometers per hour, the steering gains a bit more heft and feeling to it, which should give you a bit more control. Now, while that is true, and I'm feeling that now, I still find that the steering feel of the Lamando to be on the lighter side. You see, I've driven wheels with hefty feelings on the highway, like my Miata is one of the examples of that, but this Lamando still leans more towards the light side. Now, despite that light feeling of the steering wheel, it does have a pretty quick steering ratio, and the turn-in is also quite accurate. Now, that is something that I'd expect from, let's say, one of the sportier brands under the Volkswagen group, like Audi or Porsche or Lamborghini. But I love that they also gave that kind of steering tuning in this Volkswagen Lamando. It makes me feel like I'm driving a sports sedan, despite being more of a budget offering from Volkswagen. Now, the suspension tuning of the Lamando leans more towards the sporty side. You see, you won't get the same cuddling feeling as if you're floating over the road like, let's say, a Toyota Camry or maybe even a Rolls-Royce. But I love that they've tuned this to be more on the sporty side. So that means that we've got a sharper handling response and also a faster cornering ability. The thing is, the compromise in that regard is you would feel most of the imperfections on the road. We're going through a not so perfect road here right now, and it's all being transmitted inside the cabin. Now, I'm not saying that this thing has a poor NVH level. On the contrary, NVH is pretty good. We were just on the highway, and on the highway there wasn't any wind noise that's coming inside the cabin. Tire noise was also minimal, almost non-existent, and there are no creaks, rattles, or shaking parts inside the Lamando. Now granted, this media unit I have here has over 10,000 kilometers on the clock already, so you couldn't really say that this is a brand new car. But the fact that everything just feels so solid, so well built, speaks volumes about the quality of this Volkswagen Lamando. Now the Lamando is equipped with a 7-speed dual clutch transmission, which means that you shouldn't drive it like an automatic transmission or a CVT transmission vehicle. Now having said that, normally if you're used to an automatic or a CVT, you just mash on the gas pedal and just expect the car to move forward. With the dual clutch transmission, that's not gonna happen. If you mash the gas pedal, it's going to jerk around and it's going to be quite rough. DCTs would require a smooth throttle input, and it would give you the goods really well. Now, the good thing there though is the acceleration capability of this thing is phenomenal. Even in a normal mode, we're in normal mode right now, we're accelerating. As you can see, that suspension tuned for sportiness handles these curves really well. There you go. And we don't really have any issues with the upshifts because the DSG is upshifting really quick and really seamlessly. Awesome. You see, yeah, this Lamando is really tuned more for sporty driving. And that dual clutch transmission, it completely complements it. Overall, guys, well, what can I say? This Lamando is a proper and true driver's car. But you need to have the right amount of driving skill to pilot this thing, because the power delivery of that 7-speed dual clutch transmission is pretty abrupt and really fast. And you have a really sharp steering response. And you know, if you're an uninitiated Volkswagen driver, you might get the shock of your life when you first drive this thing. But if you are quite familiar with the way these VWs drive, or maybe you drive an Audi, or a Porsche, or a Lamborghini, well, you know exactly what I'm talking about. For a car that's meant to blend in, the Lamando SEL in Misano Red sure stands out in a sea of SUVs, crossovers, and even Innovas. It has that humble bragging look, where its subdued German styling makes it stand out even more. Now luckily, it also has the performance to back it up and satisfy its driver owner. Now, if you're the type of person who would want a different option from the usual Civics and Corollas out there, well then the VW Lamando SEL offers you a viable and dependable option. Thanks for watching.